Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Number 1, things with stripes. Number 2, ice cream. Number 3, staying up late and being allowed to watch TV. Number 4, water fights. Number 5, candy floss. Number 6, Superman. Number 7, people falling over.
That was numbers 1 to 7. That's Brilliant Things. Every Brilliant Thing is a wonderful solo show, though in fact it's solo with about 100 supporters, which I originally saw in Edinburgh in the Roundabout, which was Paines Plough's space. And the gentleman speaking to you now is Jonny Donohoe, who was such a success there that he got an invitation to appear at Barrow Street in New York, where he's 5 or 6 weeks into a 4-month run. Jonny, thank you for that and welcome.
Thank you. First
of all, what happened? How did you get into this? Because you're a stand-up comedian rather than an actor.
I'm chiefly a stand-up, yes. Duncan Macmillan, who co-wrote the play, who wrote the original Sleeve Notes, which was a short story about a little boy who makes a list of everything brilliant in the world as a way of helping his mother, who is very much suffering from mental illness and suicidal depression. He asked me if I would get involved with him in converting this short story, along with George Perrin, the director, into a full-length one-man show with a huge amount of interaction. So we met up in Shropshire, in Ludlow, which is the home of Edinburgh Theatre, who are the co-producers. And we spent about 2 weeks working on the ideas and trying to find a way to bring it out and not make it just a traditional monologue, which is, I think, why he asked me, a stand-up, to get involved. The other reason he asked me to be involved is I am a stand-up comedian, and this is a show about suicidal depression. And the intention we both had was to absolutely find the funniest, most joyful way to look at depression, because I think that's the only way to deal with it. So that's my start point. And then, along with George, we would sort of do lots of bits and work through the days, and then Duncan would go home every night and turn it into a script, and I'd do a lot of improvising, and then he'd write some of that down. And then gradually we kind of hacked together a show, and we ran a very short tour in Shropshire and Gloucestershire and Warwickshire as a trial. And that went really well, and we went up to the Edinburgh Festival, and that's how we made the show.
So how long was the development process?
About 2 years. But
2 years?
Yeah, so we did 2 weeks in 2013, and then another 10 days at the start of 2014, and then another 4 weeks in the run-up to the show. But we kept disappearing off, and we were all working on other things, George Perrin, Duncan Macmillan and myself. So we'd come back and we'd look at it for a bit, and then we'd go away. And we did lots of... We had the right to fail, so we did lots of weird versions of the show. There was once a version of the show where I got 2 people up onto the audience, one of them to play the little boy, and one of them to read out every list entry. There was another version of the show where we gave out 75 scripts to members of the audience and invited them 5 hours before the show to rehearse it with me directing it, and then we put on a performance for the rest of the community at the end of the day. We were just really looking at what's the most democratic and engaging way to talk about mental illness.
And I think you have found probably the most democratic and engaging way to talk about mental illness. How exactly does it go? So you read us out 1 to 7, I think it was, spoke 1 to 7.
Sure. So
and that gives a little bit of a feel for the show, but tell us about the way that it works, how it's developed.
Well, the way a show works typically is I will come out into the audience, which is in the round, about 15 minutes before the start time whilst you're taking your seats, and I'll hand out little slips of paper. There are about 82, and they range from number 1 up to 999,999, and they've all got a list entry, which is a reason to live, something that's joyful. Christopher Walken's voice, the feeling of calm.
Christopher Walken's voice, I suspect, has helped quite a lot of people to die on film.
Yeah, that's true, but he has got a wonderful voice. It's a reason to be joyful. The feeling of calm you get when you realise that although you're in a regrettable situation, there's just nothing you can do about it. Those sort of little joyful sort of moments. So I hand this one out to people with a number. And then the ideal situation is that when I start the show, I will read out the numbers and you'll immediately shout out your answer. Also during that, I sort of cast the other characters in the play. My father, my lover, who can be a boy or a girl, any age, any race, and my vet, because there's a pivotal scene where I get my vet to put down my little beloved dog, which is a very sad scene, my school teacher, and a wonderful character called Mrs. Patterson, who is my character's childhood counsellor. So I talk to people enough to get an idea of who's going to be up for doing that. You know, you shouldn't feel fearful of coming to see the show if you don't like interaction. I'm quite good at spotting that. You know, people make that very clear.
It's also very gentle interaction, because I'm someone who generally shies away from any kind of audience involvement at all. And yet I would have no problem at all in your kind of audience involvement, because it is gentle.
Yeah, there's no humiliation at all. I mean, couldn't be further from it. There's the jokes. The joke is on no one, and you just come along with it. And Duncan and George and I are very keen to create these sort of moments where what we do is we create a scene that you already recognise, and you already know what to do in. So, a good example is I ask the dad to talk as though we're at the wedding. Now, I usually ask a 50 to 60-year-old man to do that, and every 50, 60-year-old man has been to countless weddings. He knows exactly what the form is. And you find things that relax people straight away. And unlike, a lot of interaction, it's about being joyful and about sharing things. Whereas a lot of, if you go to a magician's show or a hypnotist show, it's about making a fool of you. This couldn't be further from the truth.
Has it broken down at all? Because you're obviously taking a risk, because you're involving people who 20 minutes beforehand didn't know they were going to be taking part in a show.
No, and I worried that it might in America, because in Britain we do have a tendency to be so polite as just to go along with anything. Like we are, if I said to you, okay, you're going to play my vet, and you really don't want to, you're going to so as not to upset me. And I was worried that New Yorkers would just be a bit kind of, no, I don't want to do that. But that really hasn't been the case. I think you'd feel so mean-spirited to not do it. And no one's ever done that yet. It's never shut down, ever. And I've done about 100 of them now, so I'm confident.
And are the rumours true that you and Sarah Jessica Parker, are a unit now?
Yes, we shall be wed as soon as she leaves Matthew Broderick. Sarah Jessica Parker is... Thank you very much.
Come see me when you're done.
I shall do. Just for the listeners at home, that is my coffee arriving. I'm now a big celebrity in America, so I get these things delivered to me.
Not quite arriving on ice skates, even though it's snowing.
Yeah, that's right. Sarah Jessica Parker, she came to see the show. She was sat in the front row. There was quite a buzz in the theatre, because she's basically New York royalty. And I just thought, I'm going to get her to play my partner's, my character's partner. It's called Sam. And she was so amazing. She was so good at it. She loves improvising, and she just went for it so much, and I just fell madly in love with her. She was great, yeah.
What does the future hold for you? So you've been doing, let's say, 5 or 6 weeks probably in New York, now, having run in Edinburgh for a month. And
yes.
Did you do it in between?
We did a very short tour of the regions. We did Edinburgh for a month. We did, as part of a sort of festival in Hackney, we just did a handful of performances in London, but that doesn't really count. And then we came here, and I've done 6 weeks, and I think I've got like another 12, which is a long time, actually. For in Britain, that seems like a long time. In America, things run for 40 years, so it's a slightly different world. But I'm then coming home to the UK, and my comedy group, Jonny the Baptist, were on tour for 6 weeks, and then we'll be touring this in the UK, all across Britain, up and down, and then back to Edinburgh, where we're doing this again, and I'm doing a new show as well. So.
Are Paines Plough setting up the Roundabout again, do you know?
I can't say on the record that they are, but let's say that I believe that they are.
I'm sure your belief is well-founded.
I hope I haven't just accidentally announced something before it's ready to be announced. I don't know that for certain. I'm speaking now directly into the camera. You haven't heard it here.
And they can't get you because they're the other side of the Atlantic at the moment. So
I'm quite
okay.
safe, actually, yeah.
As I said, you are better known as a stand-up comedian.
Yes.
Has life changed for you significantly? Has it been a different discipline, becoming an actor?
Well, no, I don't think it is a particularly different discipline, partly because of the way I work. I think the way I work it is relatively similar to the way a lot of actors work. I tend to do, one to 1.5 hour shows with a narrative theme, that are constructed, that are relatively, there's a huge amount of fluidity and there's a lot of improvisation, but they're much more conceived than, say, someone who goes just on and does 10 minutes. And that's just because of the nature of the kind of work I do. So it hasn't been that different. The downside to being an actor in a one-man show is you get off and you're on your own, whereas as a stand-up there's always a support guy, and you can go to the bar with him afterwards, and that's always the nice thing. So that's the one big change. It's the sheer loneliness of one-man shows.
So does no one in Edinburgh or in New York actually talk to you?
No one talks to me. I don't know what I did. No, it's the feeling of when you come off stage of being able to share that with someone who's also done it, which when you're in... so I have a band with my comedy group, so I come off and I chat to them and they're amazing. Or when you do a stand-up tour, you've got a support guy and he's also been on stage that night, or she's also been on stage that night. When you come off here, you're the only one who's been on as a performer, and that's quite a strange feeling, because when it's amazing, you've got no one to share that with, and when it's terrible, you've got no one to console.
And what about the time on stage? Would you say we're in the theatre at the moment, the Barrow Street Theatre, with a big piano where you normally stand? Yeah,
I moved that in so I could play for a bit. I got sick of playing a rubbish keyboard, and I found they've got a piano. I wheeled that in, and I sat there and I sang some Billy Joel in the half light here. Gosh, that sounds very romantic. Or
we might get you to play us out with some Billy Joel.
Right,
that sounds exciting. But you stand in the middle of the theatre, in the round, and you've got people sort of bearing down on you from every angle. I shouldn't have said that. You'll probably never go on stage again. You've got people bearing down on you, and they're clearly all working with you, which is very interesting, very different, because normally in a theatre there's the fourth wall. You have no walls at all.
No, quite the opposite. That's nicer, actually. If something goes wrong and you're in a play, you can't deal with it without breaking. Here, things change constantly and I can react to them. That's really great. Especially when I'm saying, I've got another 12 weeks to go. Every night is completely different. Yeah. And I might do a new bit tomorrow. I might do a new section about something else. I might change something. I might play with something. The interactions are huge, but also, if somebody makes a huge noise, I can respond to that and enjoy it. That's really fun, not having a fourth wall. I think the fourth wall makes it much scarier, because you're really locked into something and you've got no escape plan. Whereas the more you can interact, the more honest you can be and just live in the moment, which is the best place to be.
The script, I think originally it was by Duncan Macmillan, and it's now, and maybe I'm wrong, but now by Duncan Macmillan with Jonny Donohoe. Is that because you're adapting it as you go along?
I've just got a great agent. I know.
And how does Duncan Macmillan feel about the fact that you've taken what might have been his original script and you are changing it every night, as you say? Some playwrights get a bit of pressure. I think Harold Pinter would be turning in his grave at the thought. Yes.
Well, the reason for when it was first launched, the show, it was I think it was advertised before we'd finished the script, so that's sort of partly down to that. But this is Duncan's story, not in that it's in any way autobiographical, but he created. If this was a film, it'd be very easy, because it would say story by Duncan Macmillan, screenplay by Duncan Macmillan, and Jonny Donohoe. He has done the lion's share, which is why it says with rather than and. But the script, I think what I've done is I've changed the tone and style of it with all the improvisation and all the interactions. And that's made it a very different kind of show. But I say, how does Duncan feel about that? I think he loves it. I hope so. Otherwise he's lying to me. But he hired me, not... he was the one who brought me in, not George. George agreed, so it's his call at the end. But I think that's what he absolutely wanted, was that feeling of, how can you talk about this in a way that's new and interactive? You can't do it just by having a script that's written down. It's got to be mutable, and it's got to change.
The audiences in Edinburgh responded extremely well. I'm sure they're responding extremely well in New York too. Is there a difference in reaction? Do Americans react differently from, I better say British, because Edinburgh, I'm not saying English.
Don't say English, Edinburgh. From the Scottish and English and Welsh and Irish and the people from the Isle of Man, how different is it from the Brits? Well, New Yorkers are actually much more guarded than the British, I think. We talk about the British being quite...
reserved, I think is the word you're looking for.
I think that we are much more open in many ways than New Yorkers are. I'm not speaking for Americans, because I think it would be dangerous to say Americans, because New York is such a different beast. Yeah. What is really noticeably different is, in America, and certainly in New York, there is a culture of therapy, of going to see someone professionally, of talking about your mental health issues, in a way that we don't have in Britain. And that makes a huge difference, because this show is... some of it is very based on the language of therapy, and that feeling of group therapy is something we wanted to kind of engender into the room by the end. So that has an immediate language that's much more clear here. And I think what that means is that they're more resistant at the top, and by the end they're more keen than the Brits. So in Britain it was an easier start, and I sort of kept everyone at the same pace. Here it's hard work in the first 10 minutes, and then by the end they are more open than even the British were by the end. So I think that's how it feels different.
Is the kind of tipping point between laughter and tears still the same?
Yeah, I think so. I think the roundabout space in Edinburgh, the Paines Plough space, is so beautiful and democratic that I think it was often a more emotional show there, because you're so close to people, you're so aware of one another's emotions, whereas here it's a traditional theatre. You have a lot more personal space. You've got, ceilings that fly up, 40 feet above you. There's a lot more space for that emotion to travel. And that makes for a different kind of feeling, and I don't think people are as weepy here as they were in Edinburgh. But then I would also add, Edinburgh was a strange and interesting thing, because we opened the show, it's about severe depression and suicide, but an incredibly joyful look at that. And 2 days after we opened, Robin Williams committed suicide. Now, every audience member from that day on was hugely affected by that. We're at the biggest comedy festival in the world. Half the audience are comedians or involved in comedy. 5 or 10 of them have worked with Robin. The rest have been influenced by him their entire life and adored him, like myself. And I never met him and have no knowledge of him, other than the fact that I've got 10 or 15 friends who knew what a wonderful man he was and what a pleasure he was to work with. So the audience reaction in Edinburgh was always very aware of the fact that those two things came together, that people came to see the show aware that Robin was on the front page that day. And that's very hard to deal with. So I think now we're seeing the show in a much more kind of day-to-day general sense than that sort of, we're in a little bubble of that terrible tragedy.
And how is New York treating you? Are you enjoying the experience? Have you been here before? Have you lived here before?
I came here when I was 5 with my father, and we stayed in a hotel. We stayed in a hotel between the Twin Towers. I can't remember. My father was a businessman slash charlatan, and I'm not 100% sure what it was he did, but I know that he got invited to come out here for a business meeting, convinced people that he could bring his entire family, my sister, myself and my mother, did. And on the first day at the hotel, and this was that, the Hilton that was between the World Trade Center, he managed to convince the concierge that he was very important, and they sent champagne to our room and fruit. My father was not important on any level, but what a great con man. I wonder why I became an actor and a comedian. Anyway, that was my only knowledge of New York. Was 5 years old, which is perhaps a bit too young to understand it or appreciate it.
You're now a wee bit older than that.
I'm a little bit older than 5 now.
And are you understanding and appreciating it?
I think so. Greenwich Village, which is where I am, is amazing, and it's sort of, I kind of find it very hard to even bother to leave here because it's such an astounding part of the world. The food here is amazing. You could just come here and do nothing other than eat and feel like you'd had the most extraordinary experience. But I'm trying to push myself into doing other things on top of the eating.
Yeah, you'd probably explain like Mr. Creosote before too long.
I've been to the Met. I'm going to try and do some culture now.
So, is this the Met the Opera or the Met the Art Museum?
The Met the Art Museum. That was great. That's...
Yeah, I'm between two visits. I need to go about 4 times to see everything in a visit.
It's not,
two.
Yeah, that's right. It's not possible to see. You go and feel like you haven't yet started by the end of a day. But that's pretty good. No, I love New York.
And you're finding enough free time to do everything that you'd like? Well, you've got 3 more months, so...
Well, I've got 3 more months. The show's only an hour and... Well, I'm on stage for about an hour and 25 minutes. So that's not bad for a day's work.
Excellent. And do you know beyond... You said you're touring with the band...
Jonny and the Baptists.
Jonny and the Baptists. That's through the election period, isn't it?
That's right. The show's called Rock the Vote. And we start on the 1st of April. Not a joke. And then we tour all the way through to the 9th of May, which is the day after the election. We finish... and we're going to about 40 towns, and the show is really about trying to engage young people into voting. It's a comedy show, but we'll hopefully be able to respond to the general election every day, and that's something I'm quite looking forward to, is sort of being able to be satirical everywhere we go.
So you could be responsible for whoever the next Prime Minister is?
I don't feel I have that level of power or control, and if I did, that would be a terrible thing, because I would use it for bad reason. But I would love to have one bit of control. It'd be great to think, because we're playing near Thanet South, and it would be great to think that Nigel Farage doesn't become an MP. That would be one bit of control that I would be happy having, and I think would be good for the world. But other than that, I'll let democracy take its course. And
apart from that fairly short interlude, you will pretty much have been doing Every Brilliant Thing for a year solidly from Edinburgh to Edinburgh.
Pretty much, yeah.
And do you like the idea of taking it somewhere else after that, or by then will it be time to move on?
The difference between this and doing a 1-hour play is that it is different every single night. So I'm not bored yet. I'm halfway through that year. So watch this space. I think I'll keep going for a bit longer, but then I might go mad.
It's certainly a wonderful show. For anybody in New York, it's playing at Barrow Street at the moment. As Jonny said, it will be in the possibly Roundabout in Edinburgh in August, and it will be touring at some point between about May and August.
Yeah, all of May and June.
All of May and June. Jonny Donohoe, thank you very much indeed.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.